Shalom. Kohalo Yahweh Bashanah Shai Bashim Rakakadash. Double honors into the apostles and the elders. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so, now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners. And to the Akwath that are listening and learning, to you I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone, coming at you with another lesson in truth. Salakia. Voice is a little scratchy. And this is from the book Hidden Heroism. I've been going into this book a lot lately. And just to show you that the racism that was in America was in every facet of this government, from military to the banking. All right. This is a short video that was sent to me earlier by a Ephraimite woman, and it reads, and the video is called "A Segregation Wall Has Stood in Detroit for 80 years. Residents Don't Want It Taken Down." So we had a brief conversation about the video, and I thanked her for it because I definitely had intended to use it to for edification for the Critical Race History channel. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So starting in this book, Hidden Heroism by Robert Egerton. Let me put it up. This Robert Egerton. So this is written by a so-called white man, Robert Egerton. And on page 107, let's see if it has an image of him. No, it doesn't have an image of him. It's Salaki. I'm just going to grab a cough drop so that I can Salaki. His name was Satan, because I was fine before I turned the camera on. Then all of a sudden, you know how it goes. Satan does try to hinder. All right, but starting on page 107, at the bottom paragraph, and it reads, upon the 17th of February, 1919, New York City knew no color line. Now, remember also 1919 was, if I'm not mistaken, that's the same year of the Red Summer. All right, so just what, 5-6 months later, you know, the destruction of many cities and strongholds where Negroes had built up neighborhoods that were self-sufficient and that were actually better than the white neighborhoods, their counterparts. You know, they were actually doing better, and all these places were attacked by white people simply out of jealousy and hate. And then policies were put in place to make sure that never happened again. Even though these Negro towns and places where these things took place, they didn't do any damage or harm to their white neighbors around them, but yet they were victims of their hate and jealousy. All right, Rosewood, Black Wall Street, the Black Belt here in Chicago, the events that took place in the Carolinas, Elaine, Arkansas. All right, all these places were well-to-do places for prosperity. Families that were together with both mother and father, as you see on the screen. This is prior to feminism and the whole I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar movement, which is really targeted at Negroes and so-called Negroes, so-called Latinos, and it has worked. It separated and destroyed our families, but now, you know, the curses are falling upon Esau, Edom. It's now affecting their families as well. But let's go ahead and begin to read, and then then I'm gonna go into some scriptures and play a portion of this video. But it says, similar parades honoring returning black soldiers took place in Chicago, Washington, Cleveland, and other cities where onlookers expressions of respect and affection seemed to promise better times ahead for race relations. Little did they know, because this was 1919. Okay? So remember what happened that summer. All right? So it says for race relations, a grateful white reward for gallantry of black American soldiers, but only in a matter of months the promise was shattered by deadly race riots. See? In many of these same cities, including Chicago, Washington, even New York City itself, and at the same time, exceptionally brutal lynchings spread throughout the South. Even before African-American combat and labor troops left France, racial segregation and discrimination by white officers, troops, military had led to violent confrontations, including what appeared to have been numerous summary executions of black soldiers. A U.S. Senator presented a Senate investigation committee with the list of 60 names of black soldiers allegedly executed without court-martial. One black soldier was photographed hanging from a tree limb, and members of the grave and registration service testified that some men whom they had reburied had rope burns on their necks, indicating they had too been hanged. When questioned, many officers denied these charges. Of course, these white guys denied this, so-called white. But one officer testified that they had been in charge of the execution of 2 black soldiers. One of them had been drugged to keep him quiet before he had been hanged. Wow. Despite shockingly compelling testimony like this, the Senate quickly dismissed the charges, concluding that they were without foundation. And this is a typical thing when you set up the devil to investigate the devil. How you have the police investigate the police. You get no justice here. And matter of fact, let's grab a quick scripture. This is Ecclesiastes 12:10. And it reads, "Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness." All right? So his wickedness is just without bounds, and iron is always going to rust. So no matter how clean and shiny you clean it up and scrape the rust away, it's going to return. These people have systems still to this day set in place to elevate their people to prosperity. They gave them unfair advantages over so-called Negroes. All right, especially over Hispanics and natives as well. You know, well, the natives were forced on to reservations and are still there to their day, so they got royally fucked. You're right, while these people prosper on their land. All right, but then they set policies in place that kept so-called Negroes from owning property, from getting bank loans, business loans, and all that sort of thing, which allowed white families to own property, pass it on to their children, et cetera, and build wealth, be able to send their children to college and just have opportunities that so-called blacks have that don't have, and then they deny that these things are so, and claim that there is no white privilege, and that and that these historical truths, these sort of things that I'm reading about, as if they didn't happen, and if they didn't establish the systems that are in place today, and many of them are still there, that they benefited from. No sooner had America entered the war to make the world a safe for democracy, then lynchings in the South increased in number and in brutality. In 1918, there were 62 lynchings, one of them of a pregnant woman, wow, who had threatened legal action after her husband was murdered. She was tied to a tree upside down, doused with motor oil, and set on fire while she was still alive. Screaming in agony, her abdomen was cut open. Her unborn child was intentionally crushed under the feet of the mob. A few days later, member of the mob that had killed her gleefully boasted to Walter White, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man who easily passed as white but identified black. That's because his father or his mother, one of them, was a so-called Negro. But remember, whatever your father is, that's what you are. Doesn't matter what you look like. Okay? It says, Mister, you ought to heard the nigga wench howl. So this crowd of white people, so-called white people, these Edomites, these red devils, deceivers, that's what devil means, were cheerful and happy about the suffering of this woman who was complaining and just wanted justice for her husband and then met a horrible demise herself. This is Zechariah 11:5. And it reads, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. They that sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. And see, it's instances like this. They have the time to record the places, and they know who some of these people were. All right? There should be some lawsuit against the surviving relatives of this woman and this man. Should be getting should be getting anything that they can get from that city, from the police department, from the mayor, from the city offices, and from the families of the people that were involved. A lot of these hangings and murders and killings back in this time, they sent postcards around. Everybody received and sent them. A lot of them posed in the pictures. Okay, so this sort of wickedness went on, and it's never stopped. And as we were reading about, as we were reading about the unrighteous decrees that were in the military, well, guess what? In the civilian world, the same thing, all right, with redlining, as we're going to show you.
When we moved over here, the wall was there. We didn't know what it was. Our parents didn't tell us what it was. I don't even know if my mom and dad knew. It was kind of like the fence. It divided Burwood and Mendota. And the kids that lived on the Mendota side wanted to come to the park, so they would hop the wall. That's what the wall was to us. It was like a fence, that's all.
I had a close friend that I often studied with in the library. But we had midterms coming up, and my friend invited me over to his house, actually a couple of blocks from the Burwood Street. And we came across this massive wall which seemed to terminate nowhere, just went on. And he kind of smiled and said that the kids who come to the neighborhood, this is one of their initiation rituals. You climb the wall and walk it as far as you can. And I guess I got about a city block before I tripped, fell into the soft grass of the backyard, and I just looked up at him and said, this is really absurd. Why would they not have put a chain link fence up to separate neighborhoods rather than this brick wall? And he kind of changed his expression, looked down at me and said, it was to keep people like you away from people like me.
This is the Burwood Wall, part of Detroit's 8 Mile, Wyoming neighborhood. Built to separate black residents on one side and white residents on the other. A housing developer built this wall in 1941 in order to guarantee mortgage loans for white families in a new development to the west. Loans black families were denied at the time.
When the developer went to the local banks, they, of course, inquired of the FHA because they wanted their mortgage loans insured. The FHA said, this new development is all well and good, but it borders an area that is considered hazardous. You would be building homes adjacent to a black community, and there's potential for racial strife. And so he went directly to the FHA and said, what if I construct a substantial 6-foot concrete wall, which would separate this hazardous area from my development? And the FHA bought it. When you see...
Wow. So it just goes to show you that these people who complain about this thing that they call critical race theory, they change the word theory when I will continue to say it should just be critical race history or historical facts, because this is truth that people should know. You shouldn't be. How can you teach an education and leave this out? Why? When you got a people who want to be looked at as if they're the good and the pious and helping people, and when they got all their wealth and their power based upon unrighteous decrees. This is that was in their favor, right? And their children and people that look like them benefited from to this day still. Those sort of banking practices still go on in certain neighborhoods, all right, in certain areas. But this is Ecclesiastes 10:8, or Sirach 10:8. And it reads, because of unrighteous dealings and injuries got by deceit, all right, damn devils, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. And so this is how the so-called white man got to be so wealthy in America, and how the so-called Negro got to be so poor. They destroyed your neighborhoods and cities that were profitable when you had good education and your families were together, and they put in policies that separate you, to get the man out of the home, gave gifts to the woman who quickly turned on her men. And then now, you know, you have single parent homes, and this from this highway from school to prison, you know. You have the family court systems, which are not for the families or the children at all. Remember the whole the Title 4D, which is fraudulently called child support, is actually illegal. It's fraud. There is no law. There is no entitlement to it for women. That's all a lie. And they just basically enforce it under fraud and make it lawful, the same way they do with the same way that they did with these illegal bank loans. The way they were able to keep Jacob from getting the loans and allowing so-called white people to get the loans. So the whole system is all a system of fraud and deceit, which is set up to destroy Jacob. Flip side of it, that it is destroying America, and the curses are now falling upon Esau, Edom. This is Deuteronomy 30:7, and it reads, and Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thy enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecute thee. So now the curses are falling upon the so-called white man and the other heathen nations. Look at what's happening to them financially. Look at what's happening. Look at what's happening in the world with all these crazy floods and plagues of animals, the mice, locusts, earthquakes, fires, floods that are killing them, destroying their property, destroying their homes, destroying their financial structures. And this is just the beginning, all right? The birth pains, of destruction, and as as the days go by, the birth pains are going to get worse and worse until all-out war, Armageddon, comes, and we're close at that time. The enforcement of the MOTB, all those things are at hand, all right? The digital currency, which is directly connected to the MOTB. So with that, I hope that this was an enlightening, a lesson, edifying lesson. Call halal Yahweh Bashem Awashai, Bashem Rakak Dash, Wa Abba Babal, Shalom, Kwam Yasharala.